I know trust your gut gets repeated constantly online, but about 6 months ago, at Dulles Airport, my body reacted to a stranger with such intense fear that I still think about it regularly. About 6 months ago, my husband, 29-year-old male, and I, 24-year-old male, flew from the West Coast back to the East Coast on a red eye. We landed at Dulles early in the morning, exhausted and kind of delirious in that weird post overnight flight way. If you know Dulles Airport, you know that the pickup situation can be chaotic. Arrivals get backed up constantly, so instead of waiting downstairs, we took our luggage upstairs to departures, because pickups there are usually way faster. It was cold outside, but after hours in airports and on a plane, the fresh air honestly felt nice. We leaned against those concrete barriers outside the terminal while my husband called his mom, who was driving from Potomac to pick us up. Traffic was bad, so we were just standing around waiting. That's when a man came over. At first, there was absolutely nothing strange about him. He looked like a completely normal late 20s or early 30s tech guy. Clean clothes, fleece vest, AirPods in, well groomed, maybe slightly dirt nails. Honestly, the type of person you wouldn't look twice at. He told my husband he liked his jacket. My husband thanked him, and he complimented mine too. I awkwardly said something like, "Thanks, man. You too," even though his outfit was pretty generic. He smiled and sarcastically replied, "I'm sure you do." It was subtle, but something about the tone felt slightly off. Still, none of it seemed alarming. We made small talk, he asked where we were headed, and we said we were staying with family nearby. He started talking about family too, except every comment he made had this bitter, self-depreciating edge to it. At one point, he said something along the lines of, friends and family not mattering anyway. We tried being nice about it, just casual conversation with a stranger while waiting for a ride. Then something changed. I cannot explain this properly without sounding insane, but the atmosphere shifted so suddenly that I physically felt it. I got chills all over my body, not anxiety, not nervousness, actual primal fear. The guy's expression changed completely. He was still talking normally, but the way he was looking at us suddenly felt deeply wrong. The only way I can describe it is that he looked at us like he wanted to hurt us. There was this intense anger behind his eyes that absolutely had not been there before. I remember noticing he had no luggage at all, just a backpack, which struck me as odd because he mentioned getting off a long flight. Then somewhere in the conversation, he casually said, "I don't have a home." Again, none of this sounds terrifying written out, but standing there in that moment, every instinct in my body was screaming at me that something was wrong with this person. My husband usually gets absorbed in conversations and doesn't pick up on weird vibes immediately, but I knew I needed to get away from this guy without escalating anything. So instead of abruptly saying we were leaving, I quietly walked back inside the airport and down the ramp toward arrivals, leaving my husband outside talking to him. I made an excuse that I had to go to the bathroom, and he just said, "Oh, the bathroom, huh?" I know that sounds terrible, but I genuinely thought if I acted alarmed or made it obvious I was scared, something bad would happen. Once I got downstairs, I called my husband and told him, as calmly as I could, "You need to come inside right now. Something is seriously wrong with that guy." While I was on the phone, I could hear the man say, "Oh, is that your friend? Tell him to come back out." My husband wrapped up the conversation politely, saying something like, "Nice meeting you, man." And the guy responded in his cold, almost mocking voice, "Yeah, I'm sure he really meant that." The way he said it generally made my stomach drop. A minute later, my husband finally came back inside. The second I saw him walk around the corner, I felt relief wash over me. Before I could even explain myself properly, he immediately said, "No, I get it. That felt really fucking scary." That was the moment I knew I wasn't imagining it. We waited inside until my husband's mom arrived. The second we got into the car, she started asking how we were, excited to see us after we'd been away for a while. And honestly, I was relieved to see her too. Not just because we hadn't seen her in some time, but because it generally felt like she had unknowingly pulled us out of something awful. The entire time we were driving out of the airport, I had this horrible adrenaline still running through me. I immediately started trying to explain what had just happened, talking too fast, trying to describe why the interaction had scared me so badly. But the more I tried explaining it out loud, the more impossible it sounded. Nothing had technically happened. The guy never threatened us. He never followed us. He never raised his voice. And yet I have never felt a stronger instinctual fear response in my life. I think part of what frustrated me so much was that I couldn't properly communicate what had felt so deeply wrong about him. Not to her, not fully to my husband, although he felt it too, and honestly not even to myself. As we drove out of the airport, we passed the same man sitting alone further down the terminal. He didn't look over at us, but I remember staring at him through the car window, feeling like we had narrowly escaped something I still can't explain. So to the man outside Dulles Airport that morning, let's not meet. Quick note, while I wrote this in a story/book format, it is in fact a true story, and the dialogue is as close as I could get to accurate with my memory of something that happened over a decade ago. Anywho, here goes. It was 2015, and I was interning in New York City for a small, independent fashion designer. Because she didn't have much money, her office was tucked inside one of those converted warehouse buildings, shared by dozens of other creatives. Painters, designers, sculptors, photographers. The warehouse had a sort of backrooms vibe, and it always smelled faintly of coffee, paint, and old fabric. It was very late at night, and the place was nearly empty, as it was Fashion Week, and my boss's fashion show was the next day. I was expected to work all night. Gotta love shitty unpaid internships. Anyways, I'd been hunched over a table in the shared space for hours, finishing last-minute alterations. My boss and her stylist were in the private office, somewhere down the dimly lit hallway, and I was alone. The only sound was the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead, when all of a sudden I heard an unfamiliar voice break the silence. "Wow, you've been bending over that table all day, huh?" My hand froze mid-stitch. I looked up to see a man standing a few feet away in the doorway opposite me. He was in his late 50s, maybe. I didn't recognize him. He had a coy smile across his lips, and eyes that lingered too long. I laughed, out of reflex more than anything. "Yeah, it's Fashion Week. A lot to finish before tomorrow." He smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, wow. So you're a fashion designer." "Trying to be," I said, instantly shifting into eager intern mode. "Still in school. This is my first real internship." He stepped closer, closing the space between us with every word. "That's impressive. Do you have a portfolio?" The building was full of really talented artists, some famous. Even once I met an Emmy Award costume designer there. So when this man asked about my work, I figured this was the perfect opportunity to try a network. I wanted to look confident and professional. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my senior thesis, a collection inspired by entanglement and confinement, ideas drawn from the way fabric wraps around your body. It had touches of BDSM aesthetic, but mostly it was conceptual, about the feeling of being trap-bound. I was thinking about how sheets twist around you when you can't sleep, I explained, my enthusiasm spilling out before I could stop myself. He leaned closer, close enough that I could feel him hovering over me. I could feel his eyes on me. He wasn't looking at my art. Not at all. He murmured, "You're so cute. Do you know that?" I froze. My mind took half a second to catch up before I looked up. His face was right next to mine, only a breath away. I could feel my stomach drop. Before I could move away, he leaned in and pressed a slow, wet, open-mouthed kiss on my cheek. My body went rigid. Then I felt his breath against my ear as he whispered, "I have some duct tape in my office. We could have a little fun if you want." The air in the room seemed to have been sucked out, and for one long, awful second, I stared back at him in disbelief. "No," I managed to stammer, coming up with the first excuse I could think of. "I really have way too much work to do. Thank you." Though, barely above a whisper, leave it to a woman who grew up in the early 2000s to thank a man for sexually harassing her. Am I right? He chuckled, standing too close for too long. "If you change your mind," he said softly, "I'm down the hall." I could tell that he was reveling in the way I squirmed, and how unsafe and uncomfortable he made me feel. Then just like that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing off the concrete until they faded completely. The silence he left behind was deafening. My hands started shaking. Tears blurred my vision before I knew they were coming. I bolted to my boss's office, half expecting the creepy man to appear again in the doorway. When I told her and the stylist what happened, they exchanged that typical look, half judgment, half irritation. "Well," my boss said like she was explaining something obvious, "you shouldn't be showing that kind of work to strange men, especially that BDSM stuff." I couldn't believe it. Somehow I was the one being blamed, as if it wasn't obviously his plan all along to prey on me in that way. As if it was my fault a man in his 50s couldn't stop himself from being a creep around an early 20-something intern. It's been over a decade, but sometimes I still see his face, the coy, lingering smile plastered on it, perverted delight. I wonder how long he had been watching me before he decided the warehouse was empty enough to approach me, to touch me. Hours? Days? Weeks? I guess I'll never know. But yeah, creepy warehouse dude, let's not meet. Thanks for listening, everyone. And if you did like those stories, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. I love hearing your feedback. And if you want to share your stories, my link in the description below is my Reddit, and I would love to share it on here. With that said, as always, stay depressed.